Hey guys, and welcome back to another YouTube channel. Welcome back to another YouTube video. It's been so long since I've made a video, and I'm actually not going to be turning the camera. It'll be this way because I want you guys to actually see my outfit. And today I'm just kind of coming on to talk about how our systems, right, the systems that are in place to protect us, right, talking about justice, talking about morality, talking a little bit about superiority, right, positions of power, and why everybody was so bloodthirsty for power, right. So when you start thinking about justice, I think about the Black church, right? I think about the Black church. I think about the church in general and how the church really is a space for rejects, right? And we talk about rejects, we oftentimes think about, the lost, the those that are hurting, and perhaps those that have been overlooked in our society. But what we don't really take into consideration is those that are essentially outliers, right? And outliers in the sense that it's not always a good thing, right? People that I'm trying to think of a word. It's been so long since I've made a video. I'm drawing a blank here. They are. It starts with a D. I'm so unserious right now. Just bear with me. I'm losing my train of thought in the sense that I don't know why this word is like I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, I don't want to say deterrence. That's not the word that I'm looking for. But anyway, they are people who are really on the outskirts, right? And they're deviants. That's the word I was looking for. They're deviants, right? And so much of their lives are not necessarily normal, right? Normal in the sense that, like, not necessarily a lack of resources or a lack of adequacy, but more so like their actions, their behaviors, right? And I don't want to go so far as to talking about what specific behaviors, but a lot of times I do think that it does preface on being a person who is, could be a potential threat or danger to other people, whether that's like narcissistic personalities or whatever. And I know within the church specifically, we don't think about this, right? We think about it as the place for the people who are rejected, quote unquote, in society to go. Now, I spoke about this prior, and I told you guys how, within the church culture, you have to be very mindful of this, right? Because it is a space where there is a lot of justification for one's deviance, right? One's behavior that is not necessarily normal, healthy, and is, likely harmful, right? There's a lot of justification in that. It's under the guise of, we don't judge other people and so forth. And so I make this example to say, we're living in a day and age where a lot of people were seeking positions of power, okay? And some people go about doing that through church communities, right? Some people go about doing that through, some type of legal, extenuation or privilege, right? But we live in American society, and our justice system is incredibly flawed, right? I think about the conversations that was around, Hilton, right? Rodney Hilton and the death of his son, Ryan Hilton, here recently. And we're never here to justify, right, death or homicide of any nature. But when you just think about the system that we live within, I guess I'm just kind of coming on here to shine a light for anybody, because I think sometimes we think that justice will be served. And obviously, what I'm saying is really nothing new. We know that justice is not going to be served, right? We see this within the lives of African Americans. And more recently, right, conversations around, I think her name is Ebony Parker, right? The principal of the school, or she might be the vice principal of the school where the 6-year-olds shot the teacher. A lot of conversations around that. I was reading it this morning on Capital B News, and I just was thinking, like, you start talking about who is to blame in this situation, right? The mother is now facing, she's facing jail time, right? And Mrs. Parker is now facing up to 4 years in jail just due to negligence. So it's a very interesting conversation, right? The teacher has been awarded $10 million in her lawsuit, which was initially, I think it was like $40 million. And it's just very interesting, very interesting when you start talking about justice, right? And so you can compare that to the school shootings, right? The shootings that have taken place, church shootings and so forth. And how, whenever there is a white American who commits these crimes, there's always this sense of sympathy. There's always this sense of rationalization, right? There's always this sense of, let us empathize, right? I don't think that we, not just as a justice standpoint, right? Not even just from the justice system perspective, but even just in real time, criminalize white Americans for the crimes and the hate that they commit. And obviously what I'm saying, again, nothing new. So I won't make this video too long. I guess I'm just coming on to say, you start talking about people who are seeking positions of power. You notice this in every aspect, right? Even relationally today, I think a lot of people today are seeking power, right? You see these power dynamics that kind of play. You see a lot of, women and men on different sides of the internet really trying to go about acquiring power in their relational dynamics. And you can even see this as, relationships end, right? It's always a matter of, who was, the worst person, right? Who was the fault or who was to blame for the relationship ending, right? And obviously we know where that leads, and generally, who's typically the blame in the sense of like the conversations that we have around blame and relationships ending. But, it's just interesting, why can't it just be a thing where it's like, hey, you didn't work out with this person, vice versa. And I guess because the reality is that some people have been victimized. And I guess you talk about victimization, you talk about hidden intentions and all these different things. But yeah. So I just wanted to come on and kind of talk about the community post that I made today, just kind of talking about power and how people were incredibly hungry for power, right? I don't know how I found myself stumbling across this article back in 2018 with the New York Times, the T.M. Landry college prep school in Louisiana, where they were abusing the children and fabricating stories to get into Ivy Leagues, right? All these different things, fabricating stories about college acceptance letters that were never there, fabricating stories about poverty, just really playing into every racial stereotype, but just how they were able to do this, right? How they were able to go about acquiring a school, abusing children, and all these different things, right? And so, again, I always refer to Thomas Sachs's work, which is somewhere it's right all up in here, when he talks about just persons of inferiority, and how I don't know, I think whenever you have people with inferiority complexes, which I think every human maybe possesses a little bit of that inferiority, because I think you have to be so incredibly intentional and so incredibly rooted in your own life and like everything. And I think even still, anytime you find yourself I don't want to say assimilating with the masses, but you just step out on your front porch, you're being compared, right? You're being compared, you're being told that you're not enough, you don't look enough, you don't make enough, you know what I mean? Like all these different things. And so I think that everybody honestly struggles with some level of superiority. And so I think when you give persons power who have never had that power, right, just, quite naturally, I think it's inevitable that, destruction is going to come of that. And so it's very interesting, fast forward to today. And I think this might be a little bit unrelated in terms of power. I think this would be more so about, I don't think it's a power dynamic at play within the Black community, but I do think that it is a influential thing. I think maybe it could just be a predatory thing. I'm not even sure if it's related to this particular conversation, but recently in my community, I talk about this, not my community, but my city, they opened a Black-owned grocery store. At the time I was working for the local magazine. I interviewed the owners of this store. They talked about how challenging it was. They ended up being granted $2 million to open up this project within a food desert. Fast forward, it's been open for a few years now, and everybody is like, this place is constantly scarce, right? They don't, there was no research that went into play for, what people within this community eat, right? So what are their food preferences, things like that. There is constant, they're never really in stock of anything. And you talk to them and they just, say, hey, we're still working on it. We're getting it, X, Y, and Z. Now, prior, they had to my understanding, I think they just kind of had like a small stand at a market where they sold primarily meat products, and so fast forward, I think to open up or to scale, right, to open up a grocery store that's a very huge leap, right? But, we start talking about the Black community specifically, and if you want to talk about power, or if you could find a way to kind of relate this to power, I think it's just more so opportunistic. But I think that's something that you'll really see very often within the Black community, right? Opportunism. Like, I don't think that it is always a matter of, I think it's survival. And I think sometimes it comes at the cost of us as individuals, and so that's why I always just, here lately, I've just been kind of talking to you guys and just more so working to bring awareness. And I'm going to conclude with this, but just working to bring awareness to the fact that many of the communities that you're entering in today are not safe, and I hate to come on and sound very cynical, and, just very pessimistic. And it's not true. I'm not saying you can't trust anyone. It's not what I'm saying, and I'm not insinuating that everybody and everything is out to get you or that people are wrong or anything like that. But what I am saying is that I am noticing, right, a rise in this very insatiable desire for power and desire for money. And, when you're dealing with persons who have not advanced economically, have not advanced in any, I guess you could say maybe measurable way, right? Then, such persons are going to start to find ways to go about getting those needs met. And I do think that is becoming incredibly dangerous, right? Now, when you say, Jalen, where are you getting this information from? Again, I'm just looking around, right? I am just looking around. I'm currently reading, I can't think of the last name, it's Adam's books. He talked about 1,000 Ways to Die in America. He's a Black man. He talks about gun violence, right? I recently lost my friend's brother passed recently due to gun violence. And so just kind of wanted to read about that. And even the author touches on his own unique experiences and how gun violence has impacted his family. It's impacted my family, and it's still impacting families around me. And so very curious to kind of look into that. And just, again, like I was saying, these power dynamics at play. So yeah, that's all. I just wanted to come on and make a quick video because I haven't made one in so long, and I'm like, I need to, get back into practicing with this. I hope you guys enjoyed just a little bit of a brain teaser there for the community page there, where I just kind of spoke about power and just kind of, again, drawing awareness to this. I spoke about this in previous communities. I don't want to necessarily, pinpoint the church community specifically, but I think because so many people enter into these communities with such open arms, and I think so many people participate within these communities. I mean, I know church attendance is technically declining, but I would actually argue that it's being a little bit more revolutionized, right? I think that a lot of people are actually starting to attend more multicultural churches, and I think that's just as equally dangerous, right? Because a lot of times, in order to be in these communities, you do typically have to forego your Blackness, and you do have to forego, the things that may matter to you as an African American person, right? You have to forego, or rather overlook, justice and injustice, right? And the justice that is not currently still being served. So that's just something to think about, that's just something to think about. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and end because I think I'm rambling. I want to make a video for you guys, just kind of talking about how we can heal through storytelling, and not like so generally healed through storytelling, but just, you talk about relationship dynamics and how they can be healed through storytelling, and how I think film can play a very crucial role in forming healthier relationships with those within the community. So I just wanted to come on and say that, and then maybe we'll talk about that on the next video. So I'm gonna go. I hope this wasn't too much of a waste of your time and too much of a ramble. Peace.